learn how to trade. And he still would email and help me learn and everything like that.
Some people say it's nuts. Some people say it's insane. You know, that's what I do.
Look who's backtesting. tastytrade now has options backtesting for free. Test your trades with over 10 years of data for the most popular symbols. See how your trades would have performed in the past. Look back at profit and loss and take the guess out of guesswork. Oh, did we mention that it's free? Get backtesting at tastytrade. Look who's backtesting. tastytrade now has options backtesting for free. Test your trades with over 10 years of data for the most popular symbols. See how your trades would have performed in the past. Look back at profit and loss and take the guess out of guesswork. Oh, did we mention that it's free? Get backtesting at tastytrade.
Got the need for speed? No problem. On tastytrade, adjusting your option positions is a right click away. Rolling just got quicker. tastytrade, make your move.
Yeah, it is Tuesday, November 19th, a little bit after 5 p.m. Central Time, the best time. You know what that means. It's time for Tasty Live's evening show, a little podcast called The Price of Truth, show where we like to explore the incentives that govern our world. It is Tuesday, not Wacky Wednesday, folks. It is Tuesday, which means we have our esteemed colleague on for a very serious discussion. The one, the only, the brightest bulb in the pack, Mr. Chris Vecchio. Chris, how you doing, my friend?
Thrilled with the proper introduction, Victor Jones. Just absolutely thrilled. Thank you for that.
I did my best, my friend. And look at you. Are you gonna grow it out?
I haven't shaved since last Sunday. This is like 8 days. So
good
no,
Lord,
it's just
you are like the Wolverine. You have how did somebody have a full-grown beard in a week? That's crazy. It took me like 5 years to do that.
You know, Victor, I got to be honest. Now that I know all about seed oils, as I'm getting ready for the forthcoming administration, it's my lack of seed oil diet, apparently, for the last 35 years. Just I'm basically a tub of butter and olive oil, which I just got my blood test results back. Perfect across the board.
Good. I think I did that once. And I think I like blew up all their test equipment. Like caught on fire. Sir, I would ask you what type of what
that I'm you know, I don't have much in common with RFK, but he is also a McDonald's aficionado now, and so it's time, you know, with him, with me, your two closest friends eating McDonald's at least in this past week. It's time for you to get on board.
My two closest friends, just to be clear, are you and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Just to be clear.
In my worldview, yeah.
From what I know about
you, yes.
You have to prove to me that he ate that McDonald's. You know, because if you look at that picture of him sitting there on that PJ, on that private jet with the Avengers, the political version of the Avengers. If you zoom in on his face, it looks like he's getting an enema. He does not look comfortable. He does not look excited. You need to prove to me he actually ate that stuff. I guarantee he did.
Good start.
And what a horrible look, by the way. You know what I mean? Why would Trump put him in that position? You know what I mean? That's like the opposite of what he's trying to push. Why would you make him take a picture of McDonald's?
I'm going to die on this hill. McDonald's Quarter Pounder has better macros than anything you can get at Panera.
Again, false binary choice. Both of those are bad. Like, you're not saying it's better than an apple.
You are such an
or
elitist.
An orange.
So elitist. McDonald's is delicious.
Wow.
Tired of
How the
people
tables
pretending
have turned.
otherwise.
How
Tired
the
of you
tables have
pretending
turned, my
otherwise,
friend.
Victor
Touche.
Jones.
Touche. You call me elitist. All right, everybody. Shout out to everybody watching on tastylive.com and Tasty Trade desktop and mobile applications. But if you want to be part of the conversation and part of the chat that they're going to throw up, let's see if we can do this right here. Did it work? He left me hanging, didn't he? Left me hanging. If you want to be part of the chat that they're going to throw up on the screen, your screen names and all your comments, there's only one place you can do it, and that's on the soon-to-be reformed Google YouTube. So head on over there to YouTube, type in Tasty Live, subscribe to the channel. That'll give you the opportunity to squawk away. Yeah, I just watching myself back. It didn't work at all. So get in there, introduce yourself, start typing in random-ass characters, and spoof the Google algorithm into putting us in front of as many people as possible so we can save the world one view at a time. My good friend, I didn't really get to talk to you about last week's sell-off as it came on the tail end of the week in expiration. A little green on your screen after early this morning being down about 1% in the NASDAQ. So I guess if you could take us back a couple of days, give me your thoughts on sort of the weakness that we saw at the tail end of last week going into expiration and that little reversal we saw today.
It was a lot of light trading volume last week as the week came towards a close, and then all of a sudden it picked up. Friday was a pretty significant day, but it feels like a seminal turning point, a bit of a washout moment across a number of assets, right? You see the same thing at gold prices, for example, where they bottom out in the past 2 days. They've been able to turn higher. Stocks are moving back up as well. Bonds are a different story. Currency is a little bit of a different story, and we can get into that in a little bit here. But all in all, it's a market that has moved up over the course of November. It was perhaps shaking off some of the post-election excess. Net. Are we holding breakout levels? Are we holding back above significant points? Sure, we're starting to make that progress again. But here's the thing, Victor, like the S&P, it's strapped between its 1 month and 1 week moving averages. The NASDAQ, same situation. And oh yeah, we have the most important macro event of the week coming up in Nvidia earnings tomorrow. Do we really think that people are putting too much stock into any price action here in this rebound over the past 2 days? I don't think so. But at least some good writing on the wall. There's an actual accredited auditor that's willing to take SMCI's business. BDO now stepping in as the independent auditor for SMCI. Their share prices had a bang-on day today. I think they were up, 33% or so, 31%. And that has spillover effects for Nvidia, being the third largest customer at this point in time. So perhaps Nvidia comes out tomorrow with another good set of numbers. Blackwell chips, they're not really overheating. There were, and I promise these aren't Tony's Taiwanese sources, there was an article that I retweeted from a journalist in Taiwan last night saying that the suppliers for these GPUs, for the Blackwell chips on the ground in Taiwan, were confused by reports they were overheating. They hadn't seen that in any of their testing, nor had they received any customer feedback or complaints that the Blackwell chips are overheating. So if we can get that out of the way, if we could talk about SMCI and perhaps sweep that a little bit under the rug, and we get a positive picture for demand, I think NVIDIA is well positioned, technically speaking, to continue its advance. And that in turn should help revive some semi-leadership here, which should spill over into the broader NASDAQ as well. But if it's a miss tomorrow, let's be clear, the market seems like it's looking for an excuse to perhaps drop at this point in time. I don't know if that's related to forthcoming legislation or how the perception of the House composition has changed since we spoke a week ago, although the majority seems to be slimming day by day with the picks that Trump has taken for his cabinet. I don't see much of a reason to change positioning this time last week. Now this week, the same S&P 500, ESH5, 6,000 calls that I have, I'm still holding them. Same thing for the 22K calls in the NASDAQ. It's chop and grind. We're still in the midst of an uptrend. Bless you. Maybe.
I'm short, man. Not net short, but I'm pretty neutral right here. And I'm going to hold it into this event because I like you, I like to live dangerously, Christopher. And some part of me thinks this will end up being another brick in the wall of worry and we explode higher by 3% tomorrow. But I like the risk and reward of the downside here. But the thing that concerns me is the conviction. What the hell happened? It was like right at open, the buying was insane. It seems
the world
like
only ends once, right?
I know exactly. Like at 20,300, like at these levels, the demand was insane. It was pretty decent volume at the open, as you would expect, but there was no hesitancy to buy up this morning's weakness. And but to me, the weird thing about it is VIX didn't come in at all. We sort of did the opposite. VIX at 1635, up 77 cents, /VX at 16 and a quarter. So even with the risk rally through 3 of the 4 majors, didn't make a dent in vol. And so you were sort of making a tongue-in-cheek reference to the Nvidia earnings event being the most important macro event on the calendar, but it really
wasn't
is.
tongue-in-cheek. No, that wasn't tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
That's very serious.
Yeah, it really is. You can definitely see like the entire market sort of hedged up on this thing, and even with a risk rally, it wasn't enough to bring vol down. It actually did the opposite, man. How do you think about vol here, 1630?
That's a sharp intraday reversal in volatility. The move off the lows this morning because of Lavrov's statement and consequently the United States' response that there would be no response. It shows that the war is perhaps moving into a state of posturing. I found it really interesting today that prior to the announcement that Russia was changing its nuclear doctrine, Gallup released had released a poll that suggested 52% of Ukrainians were open to negotiating with Russia for an end to the war.
Of course.
And so when you think about the, Russia's change in nuclear doctrine, also like trying to be sober-minded about this, does that change their nuclear posture in a manner with which, say, the United States is fundamentally different than what the United States is fundamentally right now? No, it's not. Right? So perhaps it seems like it's ratcheting things up, but then again, you always have to fade the nuclear war bias. I saw people this morning saying this isn't a nuclear fears dip, it's housing market data dip. Don't fade it. If it is a housing data dip, then the market stays on the lows all day. If it's nuclear war and saber rattling, and you see all assets across the board kind of move in unison from that 8:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. block, where what was down going into the open then reverses and goes higher, and what was higher going into the open reverses and goes lower. If it's gold, if it's bonds, if it's an FX, you see it across the board. You even see it in oil prices, which are up a little bit more significantly during the day before reversing. It's not tongue-in-cheek. The world only ends once. If there's fears of significant nuclear war and that's driving the market, it's almost a guaranteed environment where you put some chips on the table and try to fade it. Because who's the counterparty, right? Who's the counterparty? The world ends.
Yeah, but then there is for a leveraged short-term trader though, that becomes problematic because there's always that de-risking, deleveraging that happens, even when eventually calmer or cooler heads prevail. So 2 quick points. One on the housing fear. I don't get why this is a fear. I don't get why everybody doesn't know that this is still not a great environment for housing, that mortgage rates have literally gone up. Like, who's looking at these housing starts and permits numbers, mortgage applications, and expecting them to rise? I just like, what?
During a seasonally weak time of the year. Yeah,
what are you thinking? So to me, I don't buy that for a second. I don't buy that for a second. And if so, then how can the market be this dumb that mortgage rates can go from 6 and 6.3 up to near 7, and everybody's waiting on more housing starts with less affordability? I don't understand that part. But on the flip side, I want to really quickly, let's dive into the saber rattling aspect. What for any of the people that missed it or just tune in to this 5 o'clock show to get caught up on what happened, what did we hear first out of Russia, then from the U.S., and what do you think, even though we saw some reversals here today, what do you think the events of today mean for risk assets over a short to medium term, if anything? Is there a play from what happened today?
Play's probably over.
You think so?
Russia, are they going to legitimately game it out? Are they going to use a tactical nuclear weapon on the battlefield right now? They could. Where would they drop it? In Russia? in territory that Ukraine is currently occupying inside of Russia. It's a hard sell for the population, right? Because then these areas can't be populated by the people who've been overrun by the Ukrainian army. Are you going to use it in the Donbass region to perhaps encircle? Well, no, because then all of a sudden these people who you're supposed to be annexing back into Russia, you're dropping a nuclear weapon on. So in this context, I don't think it really moves the needle all that much. It just shows that we're heading into perhaps the tensest phase of the war because it's the tipping point between resolution in a manner that Ukraine feels like it's going out with its head held high versus one in which it's merely biding time for the next wave of Russian incursions a few years down the road. The form and function matters, right? If there's a demilitarized zone that's sustained by troops that are unrelated to Russia or Ukraine, that matters and makes a big difference. It's not always been pretty, but there hasn't been significant conflict on the Korean Peninsula in 70 years. There's been a lot of cold conflict, a lot of missile tests, a lot of one-off incidents, but there hasn't been an outright war. And maybe that's the stalemate, that freeze that we're ultimately gearing in towards. But the Biden administration knows that the Trump admin that's coming in is not going to be partial to arming Ukraine to the teeth the way that the Biden admin has. And they seem to be pushing out as many weapon shipments and armaments out to Ukraine as they can right now, as it were. So the next, how long until Inauguration Day? We're about 2 months away, 60 days or so. It's going to be a very tense period, but Russia knows that there is a more friendly group of people coming in to steer U.S. policy moving forward. And so Russia effectively wants to grind this into a stalemate. If I'm thinking from Putin's perspective, Russia probably wants to just have this ground into a stalemate for the next 2 months and say, look, Biden just tried to arm you guys to the teeth. You guys just tried to make a big push. You couldn't do it. Now you're not going to get any more weapons. Let's draw the line in the sand here. And Trump is going to turn around and say, we're not going to supply this war effort anymore. So I don't think Russia wants to, the war is going to end, it seems like, whether you like it or not, at some point soon. It's just a matter of the function of what the terms are. And quite frankly, I don't see a reason for either side to escalate here in a manner that debilitates their ability to secure a stalemate worth each sovereignty respected come 2025.
I saw it through a similar lens. I saw it. I wouldn't say this started today, though. Maybe the framing of my question wasn't great, because I think when Biden, to your point, Biden lifted the ban on Ukraine using U.S. arms to strike inside of Russia. Mm-hmm. To me, that's sort of this like escalation point. But I saw that as most likely you get this towards the end of a negotiation, you'll see escalations, because you're trying to negotiate for those last points. And so while to the public you're going, why would we be escalating at this moment? To me, I read that as most likely we're getting close to a negotiated settlement, and that is sort of like a tit for tat. And then the tat is Putin then changing their nuclear doctrine. And so to me, I see this as there's behind the scenes likely a lot of negotiation happening. And I look at some of the defense contractors. I look at a lot of things in the marketplace, and that's sort of what I see when you read prices. The headline is this crazy escalation, fear mongering about what's happening over there. But all price is telling me is that this is the escalation that happens as you're drawing nearer to negotiation. And I think if you're already going to get a negotiated settlement on the Trump admin, why wouldn't Biden try to get that done and have that as one of his own accomplishments? Why leave that on the table is sort of the way that I think about it. You think that's a crazy thought, Chris? That's a total guess, by the way. That's conjecture.
I don't think that's the direction that Biden's pushing in, because I don't think that's a direction that I think a lot of European allies want to go. And I think a lot of European allies are going here because so much of the European mindset is about making sure they're not seen as vassals of the United States. And so they're trying to say we already started negotiations with Putin before Trump was president of the United States. Like Schultz had his meeting with Vladimir Putin right now. Exactly. Otherwise, if it comes January and the U.S. says we're pulling the plug and then the EU is doing an about face, they are only doing that in about face because their boss told them to.
Yeah.
So I think this is a lot of posturing,
Yep.
right? Europe has proved itself that has clearly no long-term ambitions about being a great power. It doesn't have the energy infrastructure. It doesn't have the demographics. It doesn't have the ability to raise an army. Whether or not it should to fight Russia is another story into itself. But there are things that it could do if it wanted to prolong the war, and it's clearly not. It understands that the war needs to go on, so it's letting Biden, I would guess, be the bad guy, continuing to push the war forward while European leaders are saying, no, let's find ways to rein it in. Then you get the Trump admin there, and now the runway is completely foamed for negotiations to wind things down. And then we entered the whole game of how long do we have, right? Because this started earlier in 2014. We have the Orange Revolution. This is not something that just began in 2022. And does this mean that you're going to have a few years where there's peace and then there's a build up of armaments? And we begin to see signs like you and I were talking about. It was late 2021 on Jones and Friends where we were talking about some of the news flow around Russia, Ukraine. And I pointed out to you that, like, hey, apparently they're opening up blood tents along the front line. And like for a training exercise, I don't know why you'd be opening up blood hospitals along the front line. So maybe this risk is underplayed right now. So we'll start to look for those kind of things again. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this is like the whole, we're ratcheting things up to let everyone know how much worse this can get. And that's the incentive to wind things down because we don't want missiles that could attack Moscow, which I'm sure Zelensky would have no problem bombing Moscow every single night if he had his druthers.
Yeah, it's scary stuff, man. So scary. I've had the pleasure. Chicago has a pretty healthy Ukrainian population, so I've had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of Ukrainian people about what they thought versus what people will publish, and it's sort of funny the divergence between what you find when you speak to somebody with firsthand knowledge of those situations and what you read or what you see secondhand. But I'll leave that where it is. So let me ask you, if in a negotiated settlement scenario, you don't think there's more downside for defense contractors or that will have an impact on yields in any way, shape, or form or risk assets, if that's the direction this thing is headed, regardless of the big scary headlines, you don't think there's additional opportunity somewhere, whether it's downside in defense contractors or upside in yields? I guess downside in yields. I think that would be a bond rally in a weird sort of way.
I'm thinking more about what happens when the sanctions end.
Okay.
There's a lot of Russian money that's sitting around frozen in European banks right now and in holding vehicles in Europe. And I find it fascinating that as we look to potential seeds, and particularly in the wake of the election, like what has underperformed and what's performed well in the nexus of countries and companies that have served as pass-throughs for Russia. And like it's very clear, if you look at INDA, the India ETF, it has been struggling since Trump was elected. If you look at EPOL, the Polish ETF, that's down about 5% since Trump was elected. I texted you that ticker election night as something to watch, as something that would be weaker here in the wake of the election. And we talked about it last week as well. But then you look to something like UAE, which happens to be the appropriately named ETF for the Emirates, and that's sitting up near its yearly highs. And that tells me that the commodity pass-throughs, perhaps, right, in the India form, that's no longer going to be a pass-through. Poland is still going to face the issue of having to divert public funds or raise taxes, lest they experience a deteriorated sovereign credit profile in order to build up the military that they're going to feel they're going to need to build up. And I think you're going to see a big military build up in the Baltic states here moving forward. Quite frankly, even if Russia is at a ceasefire with Ukraine, they're not going to trust Putin to just sit back. No matter what the media says, no matter what Putin says, we've just seen how this is all working out. There's been a lot of equipment orders purchased by places like Poland and Estonia of U.S. equipment in recent years because they're now more worried about what Russia may do moving forward. So EPOL is still at risk. India is at risk. But UAE, do we really think that Russian banks, the central bank of Russia, Russian oligarchs who have had their funds frozen in the U.S. allied network, they're going to keep those funds in the U.S. allied network moving forward? Or are they going to bring it to a tax domicile, a financial intermediate that's been willing to be neutral throughout this entire ordeal? a country like Dubai, the UAE is going to be fine on the other side of this. I would think that even like a country like Israel would have been better positioned until we keep learning more and more about how Russia has been helping supply Hezbollah and Hamas vis-a-vis Iran through this whole ordeal since last October 7th. And I imagine that Israeli-Russian relationships will be cooled off moving forward. But that aside, right, you're looking at the world unfold where Russia can clearly see who's been its friend throughout this entire process. That's a lot of money that's going to be leaving the Eurozone, leaving the EU, leaving the UK once these funds are unfrozen, and it's going to be going to friendlier domiciles. And I think that's a big problem for Europe in the short term, right? You're going to see some capital outflows. The sanctions come undone. If you've had any money frozen in the last few years, you want it off of European shores. You want it off of US shores. And that means outflows not of really the US dollar. It means people leaving the euro. So this currency pressure that's been building up here the last several weeks, I've been trying to connect the dots about why is this such a problem for the euro and the pound, more so than rate differentials would imply, more so than Fed ECB or Fed BOE OIS spreads would imply. And I think a big part of this is if we're talking about an undoing of the sanctions, it means that the funds that have helped build up Europe to becoming a potential financial capital of the world through the Frankfurt or the Paris or the London, that money shifts to Asia, that money shifts to the Middle East. And that leaves, again, a further reason why Europe is going to be behind the curve, at least in terms of equity market performance moving forward. So I suppose a pair trade out of that, long UAE, short EPOL, long UAE, short INDA, as we look into the end of these sanctions, perhaps with the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah. I wonder about the only thing I wonder about is the INDA longer term. But the UAE, I think it's a great call. I think I just read that the Rothschilds opened a high net worth office in Dubai, like today or within the week or something like that. But
you saw that in the Illuminati News Network as well?
No, I'm serious.
I feel like the Rothschild, like keeping track of what the Rothschilds are up to is something that Victor Jones would do.
What? All right, man. No, I think what it was Walter Bloomberg, I think, on Twitter. I think he tweeted something. That automated bot that does the Bloomberg headlines.
I swear to God, I thought that was Mike Bloomberg's son until now.
I don't want to have a hodl conversation here, okay?
Let's not.
But I'm fascinated by what's happening in Bitcoin right now. I'm fascinated by, I don't know if you saw that. Did you see that? Did you see Michael Saylor? He was doing that panel with Scottie Pippen. Did you see that the other week? Scottie Pippen talked about knowing Satoshi. And Michael Saylor's face when he said it.
Okay, so like there's part of me that thinks that's utterly ridiculous, and yet Scottie Pippen's dream about where Bitcoin was heading that he tweeted out in September.
Mm-hmm.
Better analysis than I produced in a while.
I know. I saw that and I tweeted it. I quote tweeted it and I go, I don't know how to feel about this because normally, if I see Scottie Pippen talking about Bitcoin, I would go, this is the top. I'm going to fade it for sure. Like 100% auto reflex. I wouldn't look at any technicals. I would just go, I'm going short. But then I go, it feels like this thing's about to go crazy to the upside at the time. He's 100% right. It does
right.
feel like
once because he was dreaming about it, right? Like if he was just making a prognostication, you'd fade it, right? But because he dreamed it, you actually inverse the fade. So we know.
It does feel different this time. It feels like when the last time we made a high, 72 or 70, whatever the high was last time around, it felt different. It felt like a lot of FOMO in the market. It doesn't feel like that this time around. It feels very different. It doesn't seem like a lot of FOMO in this marketplace. It feels like there's a reason for this thing to be trading a little bit higher. It doesn't seem like people are mortgaging the house to get leverage on this thing. I don't know. Am I crazy? At 92.5, it feels way different this time around than 72 and change last time around. Yes or no?
It does feel different, but it's also up 50% since the beginning of September. And like that begs the question, what's exactly being priced in here? Even today, we see that the Trump administration may be putting forth, I think I saw they have a nominee to head the SEC that was announced. crypto lawyer Teresa Goody-Guillen to lead SEC per CoinDesk. That seems to be someone who would be
what? To lead the SEC? I thought he already
yeah.
gave that to Clayton.
Trump said to consider crypto lawyer Teresa Goody-Guillen to lead SEC per CoinDesk from Zero Hedge.
Oh, okay.
Right? That should be good. But like, what are we waiting for? Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming set forth legislation to open up a strategic Bitcoin reserve where effectively the United States would buy 200,000 Bitcoin per year for 5 years to build up a reserve of 1 million Bitcoin held by the Federal Reserve. And the only reason why the Fed could dispose of its Bitcoin prior to a 10-year holding period, if I'm recalling this correctly from this morning's read, would be to pay down the national debt. Now, the United States government has, I believe, about 230,000 Bitcoin on hand from various seizures over the years. That perhaps could be set as like a down payment, if you will, to put it into the fund. So then the Treasury would only need to deposit the remaining balance of 770,000 Bitcoin or so over the next 5 years. But is that really the play here? Like, what's the play right now for this space? Because I'm trying to figure out what's fundamentally changed between September 3rd and now. And given my interest and your interest in this, it's not a problem that prices are going up. Don't have a problem with it at all, in fact, Mr. Jones. But what's the end game right now? Like, when do we find a place where price discovery is complete? I have those liquidity gauges that I've shared with you. And if you look at where they've been in recent months, perhaps due to the strength of the US dollar, if you were to take a look at the value of assets on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, less repo facility, less liabilities, if we were to think about the BOJ's balance sheet, the ECB's balance sheet, the PBOC's balance sheet, that gauge of liquidity has moved from about 2.485 trillion back at a high in September to where it is now to 2.388 trillion. A forward-looking measure of M2 money supply expansion divided by CPI, that started to come in as well, right? Some of these metrics that I know Bitcoin traders like Nick Carter, someone that I follow on Twitter who's big in the crypto space, he's posted some charts recently that suggest that liquidity conditions are actually worsening for crypto moving forward. So if we're getting the SEC appointment and we're not getting a big reaction to the upside, it kind of then also reminds me of where we were after the announcement of all the ETFs, where we finally got what we wanted and it was a seminal event for people to change hands and pass the bag off to someone else. But man, the inflows to this space are enormous. Eric Balchunas over at Bloomberg, who covers the ETFs for Bloomberg News, he tweets out these remarkable stats almost every single day about how money is moving to the space at such a clip where it's just basically eating flows from not just precious metals like GLD, but the flows themselves are so large that they're breaking into some of the top 10 ETFs all time right now.
It's so dumb to me. That's so dumb. If you're going to buy this asset, because what are you doing buying the asset in a centralized way? I mean, if you have no choice, and a lot of this is passive flows, which is to me it's a crime anyway. But like, if I manage your 401k, I say you can invest in these 5 instruments, right? And then I do a deal with the ETF provider, and some of the bips from the management fee comes back to me because I gated the investment opportunities. It's all a big sham, anyways. So, but if you have the option, why would you invest through a centralized market versus invest in the asset and hold it in cold storage? If you understand the asset, it makes zero sense. It's like the idea, it maybe as a trade, right? I trade gold, but I hold gold as well. And because I'm holding gold for a very different reason, wealth diversification, than why I trade gold. I trade Bitcoin, but I hold Bitcoin as well. And the holdings of Bitcoin are for a very different reason. And you made a point earlier about when will price discovery, when will we be done? Never, because we have an ever expanding monetary supply. So we'll never be done with price discovery. And that's the whole point of the asset, of a fixed supply of an asset, right?
Doesn't that tell you that we have a lot more? See, I don't necessarily see this as like an inflation hedge, but if you're looking at it as through that worldview, the price discovery is never going to be complete. I mean, with respect to this particular cycle where we've just bounced 50% in the span of 2.5 months, right? Where's that ceiling? When do we see a 10% correction and start to think, okay, this is clearly an important psychological level. Is that 95K? We don't know. We never know.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But there's clearly some, there's clearly some
moment when we
here.
sort of jumped the shark in the short term. That's kind of what you're saying.
Right. And I'm just looking at it on my screen right now, going back to November 5th. That's the first time that we have a close above the 1 week moving average. And we haven't put a close below the 1 week moving average any day since then, although we tested it about 6 days, right? And every time we pull into it, we continue to buy. You mentioned why people would hold IBIT. I really don't mean to be condescending about this, but I got to say it's just laziness. A lot of people, particularly your typical mom and pop investors, when they want to buy an asset, they much prefer to do it on a single platform where they can go into their, E-Trade or Morgan Stanley, or heck, say you're not comfortable trading futures, right? tastytrade. Now you can just go buy IBIT and add 3, 4, 5% to your portfolio. And it's simply there as a building block for a longer term investor right now. People who don't want to go through the hoops. And realistically, if you think about when Bitcoin was first, a decade and a half ago, to actually get a hold of some, there were hoops you had to jump through. And there were shady interactions, and you didn't know the people that were holding your money. The custodians were untrustworthy. Exchanges were collapsing left and right. So it had a big, but now you don't need to worry about all that stuff because now there's a custodian, right? It's BlackRock. It's the company that wraps up everything. Heck, you have a bunch of BlackRock ETFs in your portfolio as is. So it's just about accessibility. It removes a hurdle. If you're a long-term aficionado, you and I for years have been saying you don't want it on an exchange. You want it in cold storage. That remains the case ever so. But I understand why, as the regular mom and pop investor or someone who's simply saving up for their retirement, they'd want to have a vehicle that they can just have on as a neat line item alongside everything else that they own in their retirement funds.
Let me, I should rephrase because I'm probably being too hyperbolic. People that want volatility exposure to Bitcoin, I understand it. If you want a little bit of access to something that has a high degree of volatility and you want that as a vol diversifier or performance diversifier, I understand that. So, but if you are a little bit more towards the maximalist end where you're buying this thing for a very different reason, to hedge against very different risks, well, in that case, buying the ETF or something on exchange doesn't necessarily check all the boxes you're looking to hedge against. So I guess I can totally see it as a vol diversifier. So let me be a lot fairer. And I also think IBIT listing options today is, we've been waiting for this, Chris, for months. We've been talking about this, I think, since February of this year. April when they got serious and kicked the can, and now we're finally here, which I think is great. It finally gives people a different way to think about and play Bitcoin through the options. They're not that bad. I thought they would be worse in terms of their in terms of the bid-ask spread. They're not horrible for an asset with such high volatility. It's not that bad. Is this something you could see yourself sort of playing in the months to come, putting on, either iron condors or selling put, selling call spreads to the upside? Is this something you can see yourself utilizing as we go forward, IBIT options?
Yeah, I'd like to see some trading volume in there for a little bit first. Can't say there was a ton today, although it's pretty promising that you look at like the 55 calls right now, 40,000 contracts traded actually as I go out to 59 days. So even here, like 450, 470 after hours, the tape's coming through. This is looking like a healthy options market already. It's healthier than a lot of other single stock names that we look at. So does this provide accessibility? Look, my EDEC around here is generally speaking futures trading, and Bitcoin is a very big futures contract to trade. And so if people haven't been, they've been wanting to do something from these typical tasty methodology with respect to cryptocurrency, this is now a good chance to do it. personally, when we see options listed for the first time, I like to give it a few weeks to see how the liquidity unfolds. But I got to say, this is actually a lot more trading volume than I anticipated. And it looks like it's going to be a very healthy market from the get-go.
Yeah. This thing is kind of like gold, where it's vol skew. It's to the upside. So when gold gets going, all the vols to the upside. And Bitcoin is, from what I've seen in trading the options market on FTX, if you can believe it, FTX bought a small little exchange that was doing option trading. I can't remember what they're called now. But the vol was always to the upside. Speaking of gold, we did get a reversal, man, in a lot of commodities over the last couple of days. Gold, silver, even some of the grains, crude oil, nat gas went nuts on Sunday night. It was up like 4%. Some of the commodity plays over the last, I want to say, couple of months have been underperforming. And I'm curious, you had been tracking a couple of different commodity ETFs. Is it time to start nibbling in the commodity space here, or do you think this is an area that'll continue to be faded? Or do you think I shouldn't talk about all commodities together, that each of these have different stories?
What do you mean, you people? Yeah, they all have different stories. Crude oil's been a real monster for the past few weeks, where it's really been like $6 trading range. And that's very frustrating for directional traders, right? If you've been selling calls, sure, volatility has come back in, but prices haven't advanced all that much. So if you've been fortunate, you maybe had a 2 or 3 day window to sell calls up when you've been trading near 72, or vice versa, right? Selling puts down near 66 or getting your long deltas down there. But it hasn't been a consistent environment. And at a 46.5 IVR is putting on an iron condor in the typical tasty methodology, 45 in, 21 out, with a $6 trading range in absolute terms worthwhile? No, I don't think so. I tried several times, in fact, when we were last near 72, to get filled on an iron condor, and I couldn't do it in CLF5. I suppose I'm slightly thankful for that, because the position would be down, like I was looking at it today, theoretically be off by like 40 cents.
Yeah.
So not a big loser, but rather not have money down than having it off the table altogether right now. I just don't have a great read on crude. And natural gas, to me, it's on the precipice of potentially a really big turn, because if we don't see negotiations with Russia and Ukraine iron out, there's already been a little bit of a spike in those Dutch TTF futures this week. And we're starting to cross the threshold by which the European natural gas prices are eclipsing the equivalent barrel of oil in terms of how much energy is provided. And so, and people can do that at home, just multiply the price of Dutch natural gas by 1.6282, and that will give you the megawatt per hour equivalent in a barrel of oil. So you can compare that to Brent oil right now. So now we've started to cross that threshold. It gets into a place where all of a sudden, hold on, U.S. natural gas looks really cheap, even if we have to import it from abroad, right? Let's ship it over here. That can obviate our problems, and that can create demand in the space. But if you get a ceasefire, how quickly do the pipelines reopen? Well, hasn't there been a carve out for Russian energy exports? Haven't we seen that they're getting them back to Europe in different ways anyhow? Does that really change the equation? I think that's actually the most important marker here moving forward. A lot of the pain that we saw that developed in U.S. energy markets in 2022 was predicated on supplies in Europe looking really, really, really tight. And if we see the European natural gas prices go up, then that's going to help provide a tailwind for energy here. Likewise, I would think, as Ilya pointed out today, if we do see an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, at least in the contemporary terms as we know it now, then China is going to stop buying Russian oil, under the table.
Discount, yeah.
Right, and it's going to go back to market, and that is going to cause some price disruption that could buoy what are the listed prices we see here in CLF5 and ultimately in Brent futures too. Lots of thoughts, zero conviction.
No, I think that's fair. I think it's I've been looking at commodities as sort of just this sort of like I've been thinking about them as hard assets, and so that's the reason I talked about them in just one narrative. I'm sorry, man. I'm dragging. This thing is killing me. How are you back to 100% already?
I got triple vaccinated before RFK becomes HHS secretary. Just
I
today
think
alone.
I think you got stem cell therapy. That's what I think.
It's the adenochromes.
That's what I think. All right. Speaking of RFK, smart guy, do you think this is what would you do with Pfizer, Eli Lilly, and Moderna discount RFK discount? Would you buy them? I was looking at his probabilities that he gets confirmed. And I think Polymarket, the last time I looked, had it at about 77%. So it's not as bearish as some of the media narrative is that he gets confirmed. Pretty decent odds. Though they also had, what's her name, not going to jail. Who's the FTX lady? Bankman-Fried's girlfriend?
Yeah.
Or
she had her. That's a very generous term, Victor.
They didn't have her going to jail, so Polymarket's not always right. What would you do with this RFK discount? Would you start selling puts here?
Caroline Ellison.
Yes, that's it.
Say her name, Victor. We see us. She's a high class white collar criminal. She stole billions of dollars.
Many things.
But billions of dollars, right? Like, clearly a smart person. It always reminds me. There's always this whole. Brian Hunter was a trader at Amaranth Securities a number of years ago, and he martingaled his way into a natural gas position that ended up blowing up the firm. But because he was willing to be so decisive and take such big swings, he was immediately seated with more money after his fund blew up.
You never see it coming from Caroline Ellison. She looks like the female version of McLovin.
From Superbad?
Yes.
Unassuming, I suppose, is what you're suggesting, right? And
that's a generous version of what I was saying. Yes,
McLovin's unassuming, but like it's the point. She's clearly very smart, and staying out of jail and negotiating. People may say she stabbed him in the back. Like, that's a game of survival. She played the cards better.
You'd stab me in the back. Like if we were in one of those rooms and they had you and they're interrogation rooms, they were interrogating you, interrogating me. I come out and I would say, I didn't tell him a goddamn thing,
You do not know
Chris.
me well enough. You do not know me well enough.
I didn't tell him a damn thing, Chris.
Snitch.
And then I'd look at you and go, where'd you get that KFC? Like, oh no.
It's like that scene in the A-Team when they go to see Bradley Cooper in jail and he has like a television in his set and he has his own bathroom. They're like, what the hell is this? He's like, oh yeah, I sold all you guys out. I got all these perks.
Ivy ranked 66, Chris. Pfizer at 24. Would you do anything with this, or you want to pass?
I have Eli Lilly for a very long time in my long-term holding account here, so obviously this hasn't been a fun few weeks. Is RFK going to be confirmed as HHS secretary? I would say probably yes, right? And Chuck Grassley, the immortal Iowa senator, said that he needs to have a long discussion with RFK to educate him on agriculture. So I imagine that's going to be a several-hour meeting where Chuck Grassley is basically waterboarding RFK with corn syrup.
Yeah.
Because what else will Chuck Grassley have to promote about agriculture as it pertains to HHS? It's going to be about the corn syrup that goes into all the food, which, like probably what? Not great. But
I'm about to say something horrible right now. But go take the lobby money, go spend it somewhere else. Go put this shit in somebody else. Why you want to put it in your own citizens? Like, you know what I mean? I get it, Chuck Grassley, and I get it, Iowa farmers. But if it's not good for people, like,
I'm going to stick with an eternal optimist. So I always look for a silver lining. So when I see these memes like, oh, RFK is going to ban corn syrup, and so Coca-Cola is going to have to put real cane sugar in their Coke. It's like, yeah, I go out of my way to go into the Hispanic neighborhoods in the areas where I live, to go to the bodegas to buy Mexican Coca-Cola explicitly, because it's so superior to basically everything else except for the delicious RFK approved soda that you get from McDonald's.
Is it RFK approved? That still has corn syrup in it.
I don't know. I saw him on a very fancy airplane eating a McDonald's burger with friends this weekend, having a night out with the boys. Go into
All
a
right,
fight in the
you're
city.
not going to answer my question, so I'm gonna take a pass here. I'm probably missed it by a day, so tomorrow this thing's gonna rally. It already rallied about 1%.
What-
I think Pfizer still
What
got
is banning
66%
pharmaceutical
IV
companies? What is banning
What's that?
what does banning pharmaceutical companies from running advertisements on televisions do to their bottom line long term? It's probably negative, right? There's only 2 countries in the Western Hemisphere that really allow that, or in the Western world.
Yeah, what
the
is
US
the other
and New
one?
Zealand.
What is the other?
New Zealand.
New Zealand, yeah.
Right? And so if you take those 2 off the table, right? Or if you take the US off the table, the largest market, what does that do for these companies' earnings moving forward? It's a very legitimate question to ask. Now, I could think that things like Ozempic or Wegovy, Mounjaro, they have long-term benefits. It looks like they really do have long-term health benefits. Take the fluoride out of the water, put in Ozempic, right? If we really wanted to have our way with solving a significant problem, at least replace it with something that's going to help people. So I don't know how far they fall, but I haven't seen any legitimately good modeling. I don't know if I've tried to do it myself. I'm looking for pharma experts that have been doing this for a long time, but I'm very curious to see what the long-term compounding impacts of removing that strain of potential inflow for clients, people who walk up to their doctor and say, I want to take this.
Bro.
What is it going to do for these companies' earnings? Yeah, it's going to be very negative. Yeah, for sure.
That's not what that money does. No, I'll tell you the impact of their bottom line that will have. 0%. It will be immaterial in the short run. Bro, in the short run, yes.
No,
ever. Have you ever in your life seen a drug and gone and talked to your doctor about it?
Yeah.
What drug?
Oh, are we still live?
Yeah, I know. I wanted you to say it because I knew in my head which one it was. Oh, you're killing me again today. Okay, I'll give you this. I won't say 0. I'm being too hyperbolic. You're right, but I do think at $25, and 66% IV rank. To me, I think this is a decent short put candidate for tomorrow. I didn't put it on today. I will be doing it tomorrow, and it makes me sick to know that I'm going to be owning I'm going to own Pfizer tomorrow, or long deltas in it, because I don't have any of these healthcare companies, but I'm going to. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Chris, last 5 minutes here before we get you out of here. God, man, I am dying.
Apricot seeds, man. Every time.
Good God, man. I'm so sorry, guys. Do you have an actual binary play on Nvidia into tomorrow, or are you most likely just going to you'll watch it and then respond? If you get a discount, I'm guessing you'll buy a little bit. But is any part of you going to play it as a binary event?
Not necessarily as a binary event. I'm more curious at looking at semiconductors broadly speaking, doing somewhat of a staggered iron condor here, because we're back to the midpoint of the range that we've been trading in over the past 6 months at this point in time. And I've done this 3 of the past 4 months now, and it's worked out well. I didn't put it back on at the start of November for reasons that I thought that the market would rally coming out of Trump's out of the election, regardless of Trump winning or Harris winning, just because we'd have clarity, issue solved. We're back basically to that midpoint. It sits right around 242. We're currently at 244.18. It's only 35.6 IVR, but if you were to do a staggered condor where you're basically playing against the September swing lows for the short put spread side and you're going above the July highs near 280, 285 for the short call spread side, you can still line up a 3-to-1 reward to risk ratio with about a 63% probability of profit. I would think that if the market is if we're coming out of Nvidia with my own bullish pretenses, that's why I still hold my long equity exposure. I want to give the market a little bit of room to run higher. I don't think semiconductors are going to regain a place of leadership in this market in the short term. I think if the market is going to broadly rally, that's going to be held together by small caps, in part because of the deregulation that's most likely to come down the pipeline. We've seen financials perform quite well. And with the continuing resolution, quite frankly, the first thing that comes off the board, no significant tax or budgetary changes, probably through March. The economy is on autopilot then if you get the continuing resolution as it pertains to the deficit spending. You likewise are on autopilot when it comes to the Fed cut. As it stands now, likely next month, although that could change. If not next month, then you get another one in January. So on balance, how is the market priced? 2 more rate cuts coming before the end of March. So we don't really see a change in market dynamics or leadership. You know, SMH can go up, but not as much as maybe something like XLY or PEZ or XLY, things that are more consumer cyclical, because consumers are doing better than people anticipated. And for much of 2024, rate cut odds ebbed and flowed. They went up, they went down. Was it a bad thing that the Fed didn't give us 6 rate cuts in 2024? Not for the stock market. Stock market's a stone throws away from all-time high still.
We've had a couple of 20% year-on-year rallies in risk. What do you think 2025 will bring, Chris? Look into your crystal ball. Do you see another breakout year? Do you see something more in line with longer-term returns? Or do you see a market that perhaps some of the risks, do you see a market that's pulled forward a lot of the optimism, and now 2025 becomes a year where you pay it back? What do you think? Where do you lean?
Year 3 of bull markets tends to be the weakest year. Since 1950, according to FactSet, data that I saw from them, you're looking at a 2.1% return in year 3 of bull market since 1950. So that's an interesting stat, at least seasonally, that weighs you down a little bit. In terms of how markets perform under presidents, broadly speaking, markets like presidents of either party, do we see significant downturns in stocks? Yes, I think that's the bigger picture. Regardless of who is president of the United States, there is a bear market that occurs during their term. I would challenge anyone to go find a period in time where we haven't seen a 20% drawdown in stocks at some point during a 4-year window. It happens like clockwork. Maybe for Trump, because of the tariff situation, because of the Fed, now it's 2025, and hey, the Fed's rate cut cycle's ending in a few months' time. Psychologically, that begins to have an impact. If mass deportations happen, that begins to have an impact on price pressures in the short term. Who's picking the fields at the end of the day, perhaps, becomes a question in investors' mind. I just think that if you're looking at 2025, the first quarter, if there is a window with which there's susceptibility for a downturn, it exists then. I would think first quarter, as I have it laid out, it's going to be down first quarter, choppy second quarter, and then up in the second half of the year in a very similar manner to what we saw in 2022. Maybe not as deep of a correction in equity markets as we saw in 2022, but in terms of rhythm, right? Weakness in the first half, stability, carving out to the end of the year, and then year-end rally, and then 2026 would be a better year for markets. We have to see what happens. There's so much variability in the future, though, Victor, right? Depending upon who's the Treasury Secretary, the market's going to imply a whole bunch of different things. Depending upon.
Do you have a preference? Do you have a preference?
Yes, it was not Lutnick, right? I think that Bessent or Kevin Warsh now being on the playing field are probably the 2 best macro minds that are out there. And if we're going into a world where Trump is going to be administering significant tariffs, either in a blanket fashion or perhaps more precisely, then having someone who understands currency market dynamics would be a great asset for the Treasury at this point in time. You know, particularly if the United States thinks that other countries have been repressing their currency values to artificially inflate their exports. Having someone like Scott Bessent, who is on the Soros Druckenmiller team that broke the Bank of England, wouldn't be a bad person to have leading the ship. So among all the options, you know, I think Scott Bessent's a good choice. And Kevin Warsh, you know, he's been a little bit more critical of the Fed in recent years. He thought the Fed was goosing the economy, but he has experience in high levels of economic policy decision-making. One thing that revealed itself, of course, that we were speculating on, that perhaps if you want to believe the reporting or not, but the New York Times has out in their article this morning, Trump is being deliberately slow with choosing the Treasury Secretary such that the pick he brings forth doesn't disrupt the market's broad rally since he was elected. I mean, this is a guy throughout his first term was regularly tweeting out new all-time high for Dow Jones, new all-time high for the S&P 500, right? He would tweet out his excitement when he got wind of potentially a good jobs report, and everyone wondered, does this mean there's a good NFP number tomorrow? He likes to brag about good economic data, and he views it as kind of a benchmark for whether or not the country approves of what he's doing. So I see this pick as very instrumental to that. It's someone who's going to implement his vision without destroying equity market value. So why would we see anything significant through the end of the year? By the way, for a timeline for that, news reports say that we're going to get all of the major cabinet picks by this Friday.
I couldn't believe Lutnick was a serious candidate for Treasury Secretary. I couldn't believe that was serious.
Me neither. Commerce Department makes more sense, right? If he's a guy who's very big on tariffs, Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative are the two groups within the executive branch. That would be the offices responsible for identifying the countries where tariffs should be applied, the conditions in which tariffs should be applied, and bringing forth those recommendations for President Trump to ultimately implement. So, Lutnick being the Commerce Secretary in terms of the tariff vision, it makes a lot more sense just on the outside.
I want to know what RFK and Elon thought, or why they felt the way that they felt, because they were pro Lutnick, and I'm like, really? What are you guys seeing? But that's going to do it for this hour, man. I barely limped to the finish line here. I'm going to go off with you. Chris, if the people want more from you, and they should want more from you, where they don't have to listen to me hacking in the background, tell them where they can go.
Here on Tasty Live, of course, Monday through Friday, Futures Power Hour, 1 p.m. Eastern. Monday through Thursday, overtime, 4 p.m. Eastern, right after last call. Tuesday mornings, Let Me Explain with Tom and Tody, 9:40 a.m. Eastern. Thursday afternoons with Jeff Joseph for the prediction trade, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Here with you, Victor, Tuesday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, on Twitter, at CVecchioFX. I don't know why people are leaving to go to Blue Sky or not leaving to go to Blue Sky. I'm going to continue to tweet through all of it. Right? Why not?
No flakes, Christopher. If you want to follow me at Victor Jones, the Owen Jones is 0, because I like to be difficult. Chris, it's always an honor and a privilege to get to chop it up with you. Hope the people feel the same way. If so, hit the like button on your way out of the door. Leave us a comment as well. Let's do it. Let's do this.
I had a bone to pick.
What?
I had a bone to pick. Little extra here for you. I do read all the comments in the chats. And last week we were talking about housing, and Brian the nurse said I'm probably a NIMBY. I'd like to go on the record, as it is on the record, that a few weeks ago we had just had a town board meeting to approve a new subdivision up on my street. Only one person in the entire town spoke in favor of that subdivision, because he believes that people should be able to live their American dream. And that was me. Not an NIMBY. Build.
Okay. There's a little profit motive. There's a little profit motive in there as well. Let's not act like it's all idealism.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. Sorry. The school district makes $130,000 extra in revenue per year to hire 2 new teachers. Ooh.
No, I'm talking about you. You have a personal profit motive in the deal.
What's my profit motive?
No, I thought that was part of it. I'm not gonna put your personal business out there.
I'm not making a buck on this. I'm going to have finally a neighborhood for my kid to go trick-or-treating in it right up the street. I'm a monster.
There you go. There's proof that we do read the comments, and proof that if you write something that touches somebody's soul, they do read it, and it will sit with them for days. This is proof. This was like 5 days that comment has been sitting with Chris Vecchio, and he felt the need to get that off his chest. All right, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Same time, same place, same great network. Only on Tasty Live. Peace.